Welcome back to the Writing of God and the main event of first century Christianity, the Jesus Revolution and the Hebrew Gospels. This is Yeshua Hamashiach, our personal Savior. Do you have any idea how many Israelites and Judeans were converted by reading the Hebrew Gospels? Many. It's commented on by the early church fathers. Now we're going to look at the authenticity of the Hebrew Gospels by following the witness of the early church fathers as to what was in the Hebrew Gospels. And we will show you exactly. Stay with us. We're starting right now. Welcome to the main event, where we bring you the living, dynamic presence of Yehovah and his son, Yeshua the Messiah, into my life, into your lives, and into the lives of all those that we touch. And we do this by diving deeply into the fountainhead of the Word, the Hebrew Gospels. He says in the Hebrew Gospels, they spoke of the huge lintel. The huge lintel was a huge stone over the entrance to the Holy of Holies, because you would put many more large rocks on top of it to build the rest of the structure. So he said it was the lintel, the actual stones of the inner temple that were cracked. That's a difference. Now I want you to keep in mind that this is not a contradiction of the two Gospels. It is merely a different perspective, because what was hanging beneath that huge stone lintel over the doorway? Well, the veil that was ripped asunder. And if the lintel were cracked in two, it would tear the veil in half. But to the early Greek church, the symbolism of the veil being ripped asunder, giving them direct access, direct communication with Yehovah. They did not have to go through a Hebrew priest to have direct access to God himself. That symbolism was really important to them. However, to the Messianic church, the Jewish Christian church, the foreshadowing of the complete destruction of the temple was far more important to them, because this desecrated the Holy of Holies. Right? So the breaking of the stones of the temple itself were far more important to the Jewish Christian community that had seen and walked in this temple, which was indeed probably the greatest wonder of the ancient world. It was a magnificent structure. So when the lintel was broken, the veil would have been torn asunder. So we're looking at two different perspectives, not a contradiction between the Hebrew Gospels and the Greek Gospels. So let's look at it. In Matthew 27:51, in the King James Version, which is basically a pretty straight translation from the Latin Vulgate, it says, "And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in two from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks were rent asunder." Now in the Hebrew Gospels, the same verse, Matthew 27:51, it says, "And here the temple was broken on both sides, up and down, and the earth quaked, and the stones split in the middle." Well, that sounds like exactly what Jerome described in his commentary on Matthew and the tradition of the early church, which was written in the Hebrew Gospels. Let's look at the second verse. This is Mark in the King James Version. "And the veil of the temple was rent in two from the top to the bottom." In the Hebrew Gospels, Mark 15:38, "The temple was broken on both sides, up and down." So in the other, from the front to the back, from the top to the bottom, the stones were split in two. Now the third verse. In Luke 23:45, "And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst," in the middle. Now in the Hebrew Gospels, Luke 23:45 reads, "And the sun went dark and covered the temple, and it was split in the middle." So all three verses in the Hebrew Gospels reflect exactly what St. Jerome said about the tradition of the early first century church. There was actually the stones of the temple, the Holy of Holies, that were split. And it was that was written up in the Hebrew Gospels, not the tearing of the veil. which actually happened as well. So there is no contradiction. Now we're looking, are there other sources that refer to this? Well, the author of the Historia Passionis Domini, the history of the story of the Passion of God, in the Gospel of the Nazarenes, we read that at the time of Messiah's death, the lintel of the temple of immense size had split. Josephus says the same and adds that overhead awful voices were heard, which said, "Let us depart from this abode." Yeshua was not impressed with the temple. His apostles were in awe of it, and as they pointed it out to him, he said to them, "Not a stone will be left upon each other in this temple." The temple and the temple worship had gotten so corrupt over the centuries. The high priesthood had been for sale for centuries now, and the temple had become a cash cow for those who were profiting off of it, and that was Herod and his Herodian priests. They were entrenched in their corruption. It was demonized, this temple. It was beautiful. It was a wonder, but it was a wonder made by man, and one that Yehovah could bring down. And he did. But here we have that, the author saying it, and also Josephus. So we have at least 3 citations from ancient credible sources about the breaking of the lintel of the inner temple, the Holy of Holies. So that breaking of the stones of the temple is preserved by Jerome from the Hebrew Gospel, is confirmed in all 3 verses of the Hebrew Gospels. Now we have a pattern, and that's one that is difficult to negate. Now we have a pattern. An ancient credible source says it was this way in the Hebrew Gospels. We look in our Hebrew Gospels, and it is exactly the way that it was said to be. That puts a lock on the authenticity of the Hebrew Gospels, if it's true, of course. So, do we have any other evidence that this is true? Well, the same question applies to all the events of the crucifixion, the earthquake, the darkening over the temple that descended over the temple, the rending of the veil, and the breaking of the stones. So all of these things, do they have any further authentication? Well, the earthquake damage of the Holy of Holies was hidden, so it could be covered up so that the money flow, the cash flow of the temple could continue, where you would come in and you would bring a goat for a sacrifice, as everyone had to do, and they'd say, well, this goat has a blemish, but for a fee, we will accept this goat as a down payment, and we will provide you with one that is without blemish. So the priests received both the goat and the price of the goat as a donation to their pockets and to the temple. They had to, whenever they brought tithe money, that money had to be changed by the money changers, because you could not give tithes to the Lord that had a pagan image of it on it, and that would be like the image of an emperor, for example. But for a fee, for a small fee, we will change your money to coinage that does not have a pagan image on it. So this is where they were making their money, and they were making a lot of money by fleecing the righteous that came to the temple. So they had to keep working the Holy of Holies. They could plaster it over and hang banners over it and repair the lintel and try and repair the veil. However, only 40 yards away was the chamber of hewn stone, which was the council of the Sanhedrin. And this council, in the very same earthquake, was so structurally damaged that it became unusable from that point forward. And this is interesting, because the Sanhedrin had to vacate it. According to the Talmud, in Shabbat 15a, it states that 40 years before the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, that happened in the revolt against Rome in 68 to 70 AD. So 40 years before was the most momentous year in history, the ministry, the one-year ministry of Yeshua, the Messiah, and his crucifixion at Passover at the following year. So the Sanhedrin was removed from the chamber of hewn stones and convened in the marketplace. The Talmud tells us that when the Sanhedrin ceased to judge capital offenses, that was the time when they moved from the chamber of hewn stone to the marketplace. That was the year of Yeshua's ministry, from Passover 30 AD to Passover 31 AD, the 1 year ministry ending in his crucifixion. It was the very year of his crucifixion that they brought him to the Jewish Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, and they brought him to Pilate, and who told them, take him and judge him by your laws. And their response was, well, we are not allowed to give a capital judgment of death to anyone. That has to be done by Rome. It is not lawful for us, because they had so overused their authority that the Romans had taken the privilege, the right of assessing capital punishment on someone. It had been taken away from them that very year. Yeshua was judged in that Sanhedrin chamber, the chamber of hewn stone, at daybreak on the day of his crucifixion, where he was condemned for blasphemy, for claiming to be the Son of God. That was the last judgment that was ever made in that chamber. After that, they were moved to out of the really majestic chambers of the chamber of hewn stone. They were moved into the marketplace, where all the goats and the money changers were. So Yehovah himself gave testimony to Yeshua Hamashiach as the Son of God by covering the temple in darkness, causing an earthquake to crack the stones of the inner temple in two, splitting the lintel over the huge stone over the entryway, rending the veil in two, and desecrating the Holy of Holies forevermore, and the chamber of hewn stone, which now became unusable. So as for the Sanhedrin, they continued their discussions of the law in the marketplace, to the sound of the bleating of goats and the smell of manure. They never reoccupied the chamber of hewn stone.
This is The Writing of God with Dr. Miles Jones.
Let's talk about the mystery of the first 3,000. Who were these people? This is a mystery that is critical, a missing page in history, and it is unveiled in my new book, Rediscovering the Zadokite Covenant of the First 3,000. It's a mystery that goes all the way back to Mount Sinai and the establishment of God's priestly order, all the way down to Zadok, the high priest of both King David and King Solomon, the man who built the first temple, and on down to the first 3,000, what happened to this eternal priesthood. It was tossed out, and Israel never went back to it. This is the crucial discovery of what happened to the first 3,000, what brought them to the Jerusalem temple. And it will amaze you. It will reveal to you the Hebraic roots of our faith and the Messianic church, which started with the outpouring of the Holy Spirit at Shavuot in the Jerusalem temple in the first century. It's drawn from the Dead Sea Scrolls information, never before revealed much of it, from the Hebrew Gospels, and from the archaeological finds that we have recently made, uncovering gold books from Arabia and from Damascus, which reveal a massive Zadokite diaspora throughout the Mideast. Mystery within a mystery within a mystery, all revealed to you in the book Unveiled, Rediscovering the Zadokite Covenant of the First 3,000 at writingofgod.com. That's writingofgod.com.
That's online at thewritingofgod.com. Online at thewritingofgod.com.
The idea of the Revelation of the Month Club began more than a decade ago when I was called by God to go all over the world and recover the manuscripts of the Hebrew Gospels. And I did so. I went to Israel, I went to England, I went to France, went to Spain, I went to Italy, and now we have members all over the world searching out these manuscripts so we can translate them and bring them to you. We're asking you to give us a small monthly donation so we can get these things to your door as soon as they are translated, long before they're published. You are our supporters. You get the first view at everything we do, whether it's translations or videos. You get it right there in your inbox, right in your home, every month as a member of the Revelation of the Month Club. Go to writingofgod.com to sign up.
Will you seek the Lord about becoming a partner to bring the message of the Writing of God to more people? Send your gift to The Writing of God, P.O. Box 294047, Kerrville, Texas 78029, or online at thewritingofgod.com. That's The Writing of God, P.O. Box 294047, Kerrville, Texas 78029, or online at thewritingofgod.com.